Well, hello, and thank you for coming today. My name is Robin Zimmerman. The show you're about to see was put together by my father, Leroy Zimmerman. It is the culmination of 30 years of my dad's passion for photography in Alaska. He created this PhotoSymphony as a way to share all the things he found irresistible and beautiful about Alaska with his friends, his family, and eventually visitors like yourself. What you're about to see is unlike any presentation you've seen before, and I think it will help to have some context. Before my dad's passing, he loved personally introducing each of his shows to tell his story and, as such, the story of his photography. I'll do my best to share with you that story, because I think it's important to understand what it is that you're about to see. My family came to Alaska in 1972. My dad, mom, and their two young twin daughters, my older sisters, braved the Alcan Highway in a converted school bus. They came to Alaska to explore the wild last frontier and to get away from the noise and activity of California. It quickly became obvious to my dad that Alaska was home to scenery and wildlife like he'd never seen before. With a dusty old 35mm film camera, he started shooting photographs, trying to capture the feeling of the vast landscape in front of him. Try as he might, though, he found his pictures to always be missing something. It was impossible to capture the scale and breadth of what he was seeing with just a single frame of film. So he invented his panorama. A traditional 35mm film has an aspect ratio of 3:2. Most photographs you see are this shape. The edges of the frame always felt restricting to my dad. Every time he took a picture, he was frustrated that what his eyes were seeing was not represented on the film. He wanted to photograph the entire scene, not just what was directly in front of him. He needed something wider, so he developed a system of taking 3 pictures. First, one in the center, then point the camera to the left, take another picture, then a third to the right. He would then connect these 3 pictures to create panoramic images. By doing this, he finally felt like he was getting closer to realizing his dream of photographing Alaska. Even being surrounded by the boundless beauty of Alaskan wilderness, there was one thing that eventually captured my dad's heart: the aurora. The haunting lights dancing in the night sky filled my dad with such joy and wonder that he knew he had to find a way to film them. He spent years trying to figure out a way to get the northern lights on film. The biggest problem was the fact that the aurora is always moving. His system of taking 3 separate photographs wouldn't work. Imagine a wave crashing on a beach. If you took 3 photos, first one on the left, then one in the center, and then one on the right, the final result wouldn't line up correctly. To solve this, he invented a system of using 3 cameras mounted on a base plate, all operating off of one cable release. This allowed him to take 3 pictures simultaneously, finally creating what would end up being the world's first panoramic aurora photography. He then spent the next 2 decades coming to places like this to set up his tripod in the darkness and cold of an Alaskan winter night, pointing his camera to the stars, looking for the aurora borealis. The northern lights are only visible on the southern and northern extremes of our globe. They are caused by electrically charged particles from the sun. When there is an explosion on the surface of the sun, called a solar flare, masses of charged particles are ejected outwards into space. They fly at 4 million miles an hour until they eventually come into contact with the Earth. The particles get caught up in our planet's magnetic field and are funneled towards the north and south poles. When these particles collide with our atmosphere, it excites the elements in the air, causing them to give off light. The different colors you see, greens, reds, purples, and blues, depend on which element is affected: oxygen, nitrogen, helium. The result is a circular crown of light sitting on top of the Earth. Fairbanks happens to be located directly underneath this crown. Seeing the northern lights from here is like looking up at the underside of a curtain that's made out of light. Sometimes it's gently waving, sometimes it's ripping violently through the skies. This is footage of the northern lights taken from the International Space Station. Though my dad had figured out how to film the northern lights, he still struggled to communicate the overwhelming emotions he felt when seeing them in person. The movement and energy of the aurora couldn't be captured with a still image. So my dad figured out a way to perform his aurora photographs to music, and he created the PhotoSymphony. He felt the emotional power and timelessness of classical music helped express the emotions he felt when he was watching the northern lights. Early versions of the show were performed live using 6 slide projectors. Later, digital technology would allow him to create the show that you're about to see. This is my dad's life work. It is a collection of his favorite auroras from the last 30 years, performed to the music he loved. So sit back, put down your phones, and forget about the noise and activity outside. Imagine the crisp winter air and the snow crunching under your feet as you look up toward the heavens, and try to enjoy the northern lights as my dad did, with a mindful sense of wonder and awe. And thank you for coming. I sincerely hope you enjoy the show.